Hello students, in this video I'll take up your biology chapter Microorganisms, Friends and Foe. As the name suggests, we will be studying about microorganisms and why they are considered as our friends, because what are the benefits for us, and why they are considered a foe, what are the harmful effects they cause to us. So let's begin this chapter. So what are microorganisms? As the name suggests, they are very tiny organisms because they are living. So such living organisms which are very tiny, and it is not possible to see most of them through our naked eye. They are visible only under the microscope. Such organisms are called microorganisms. And the field of biology which studies in detail about these microorganisms is called microbiology. So, Leeuwenhoek was the first scientist who discovered microorganisms in 1673. He observed the microorganisms under a self-designed microscope. That microscope only used one lens, so he could see certain living organisms in water and in various other and in soil and such other habitats. So that's how microorganisms were discovered. Now science has developed so much and we know in detail about all the microorganisms which exist on earth. So microorganisms, based on their properties and characteristics, they can be divided into 5 major categories, which are viruses, bacteria, fungi, protozoa and algae. Okay, so let's start with this unique microorganism, that is virus. First of all, I would like to tell you, where are these microorganisms found? Okay, where do these actually live? The microorganisms are found almost everywhere on earth. Right from the ice cold climate to hot dry desert, they can survive the extreme environmental conditions. They are found in air, in water and as well as in soil. Some microorganisms live outside the body of plants and animals, like on the skin or outside their body under the hair, and some microorganisms, they live inside the body of plants as well as animals. If these microorganisms are beneficial, then they help these plants and animals, but some of these microorganisms are pathogen and they cause diseases, so they are harmful. That is why we say that microorganisms are our friends as well as foe. Okay students, the first type of microorganisms, that is the viruses. It's a very unique kind of a microorganism because scientists consider them to be on the borderline of living and non-living. It is yet not decided whether they should be classified as living organisms or as non-living organisms. Okay, the reason is when they are outside the body of the host, any organism, they appear like crystalline structure. So they behave like non-living thing, okay, because they are crystalline structure, they do not grow, they do not reproduce. But once they enter inside the body of host, either it is a plant or animal or a bacteria, once they enter, they start reproducing, they start growing and reproducing rapidly. They use the cellular structure of the host and they utilize it for their growth and reproduction. So that is why it is still considered on the borderline of living and non-living. They live in air, water, soil as well as inside the body of other living organisms. Structurally, most of these viruses, they have a nuclear core, okay, the central part, which is made up of either DNA or RNA, and then they have a protein coat which is also known as capsid. This is the structure of a typical bacteriophage. Okay, this is the head and inside there is a DNA, okay, which is the nuclear core of the body, and this is the tail like structure which helps in locomotion. Mode of nutrition, most of the viruses, they are parasitic in nature, that is they derive nutrients from other living organisms which are called the host. So in this kind of mode of nutrition, only viruses are benefited The host body is not benefited, rather it harms the host. So, what are the harmful effects of viruses? Firstly, it causes diseases in humans. There are many viral diseases in humans. For example, AIDS. AIDS is caused by a virus known as HIV, human immunodeficient virus, which causes this deadly disease. Then other diseases caused in humans by viruses are polio, common cold, influenza, measles, etc. You must have heard some of these names. Then viruses also causes diseases in plants. For example, tobacco mosaic, which affects the tobacco plant. Then maize dwarf mosaic, which affects the maize plant. It also causes diseases in animals like foot and mouth diseases of cattle, pig, hoofed animals. Also canine hepatitis in dogs and cats, these are caused by viruses. Then these viruses, they also affect bacteria. Okay, so such viruses are called bacteriophage. I just showed you the diagram of a bacteriophage. So if those bacteria are useful to us, then it affects us also indirectly. Okay. On the other hand, viruses are useful in a way because some of the vaccines, they are produced by viruses. Like the polio drops you have heard, we obtain them from viruses. Then vaccine for smallpox, chickenpox, measles, they are derived from certain viruses. So that is why we say viruses are our friends as well as foe, many side effects and one useful. Okay, I hope it's clear to you. Okay students, now the next type of microorganisms, that is bacteria. Robert Koch was the first scientist who discovered bacteria in 1976. That bacteria was Bacillus anthracis, which caused anthrax. Okay, so all the bacteria, they are unicellular, that is they are made up of one single cell. This bacteria, they are prokaryotic, that is they do not contain a well defined nuclear membrane bound nucleus. They do not have membrane bound nucleus. They are found in soil, water, air as well as in body of plants and animals. The size varies from 0.15 micrometer to 1.5 micrometer. So all of them are very tiny. According to their shape, they can be divided into these four categories. Cocci, which are spherical like this. Okay. Then bacillus are rod shaped. Spirillum, they are spiral. And vibrio, they are comma shaped like this. Okay. So depending upon their shape, bacteria are divided into these four categories. Mode of nutrition, some of the bacteria are saprophytic, that is they derive food from dead and decaying matter, organic matter, and some are parasitic, that is they derive food from other living organism, that is the host organism. So a typical structure of bacteria goes like this. They have a cell wall and a cell membrane. Then there is a flagellum for movement. Inside there is a DNA, RNA. This region is called nucleoid, which contains chromosome. The nucleus is not membrane bound. Then this cytoplasm, where other functions are performed. Apart from this, the bacterial body also contain another outside covering, which is called capsule, which is a protective covering. This is capsule. This is cell wall. Just like plant cells, they also have cell wall and cell membrane. Okay, flagellum for movement. Then they also have these tiny hair-like structure, which are called pili. Okay, just to get to attach to some other body. This is a typical structure of a bacteria. So unicellular, prokaryotic, with a capsule covering which protects it. Okay. Now, next, how do bacteria reproduce? Okay, reproduction is usually by binary fission. Bi, as the name suggests, two parts. Fission means breaking. So once the cell is fully grown, it breaks into two parts, giving rise to two daughter cells. How this occurs, let me just explain you in short. This is a typical a bacterial cell which has grown. Now first of all, the DNA, this chromosome, it replicates, it forms its replica. So once it is formed, the cytoplasm, this cytoplasm, it starts dividing into two portions. Okay, the cell wall, you can see the cell wall starts growing inward to divide the cell body into two parts, and each part gets one of the nucleoid or one of the chromosomes. Okay, and then this bacteria, it divides into two parts. So when it is fully grown, first DNA replication, then the division of cytoplasm to give rise to two daughter cells. This is how binary fission occurs in bacteria. Next, so what are the benefits of bacteria? As I said, bacteria are our friends as well as foe. They are helpful as well as beneficial and helpful as well as harmful. Some bacteria are harmful to us. So first let's consider why we consider bacteria as our friends, or what are the benefits. First, bacteria are used to making curd. The name of the bacteria is lactobacillus. Okay, so once you put a little bit of curd into the warm milk and keep it aside for some time, these lactobacillus, which is present in curd, it starts growing and multiplying, and it converts the lactic acid present in this milk and protein into, it solidifies it and converts into, lactose is converted into lactic acid, and protein gets coagulated and becomes solidified. So this is how milk is converted into curd. Similar kind of bacteria, they are used to make cheese. Second important benefit of bacteria is decomposition. So whatever dead and decaying matter is there in nature, it is decomposed and converted into simpler compounds by the action of these bacteria. So it is helpful in two ways. Firstly, it keeps the environment clean. So whatever dead plants and parts, dead plants or dead animals or animal waste is there in nature, it is decomposed and it gets mixed up with the soil. On the other hand, it completes the nutrient cycles. Okay, so soil, whatever soil nutrients are taken up by the plants, the cycle gets completed and those nutrients again enter the soil. So it improves the soil fertility also. Next, another benefit is nitrification and ammonification. Whatever dead plants are there, these dead organic matter, which could be dead plants, dead animals or animal waste. So dead organic matter, I would say, they contain proteins. These proteins are to be converted into ammonia. So for that, ammonification is required, and certain bacteria, they act on protein to convert it into ammonia, and some other type of bacteria, they convert these ammonia into nitrates or nitrite salts. So this get mixed up with the soil, okay, and this will improve the fertility of the soil. So nitrification and ammonification, it is carried out by certain bacteria. For example, Nitrosomonas, it's a name of the bacteria which causes nitrification. It changes ammonia into nitrate salts. So this process helps in completing the mineral cycle and improves the fertility of the soil. Next is nitrogen fixation. As you all know that plants need nitrogen to make protein and to make other nutrients, but plants cannot take in nitrogen from the air directly. It cannot take in it cannot absorb nitrogen through stomata. So plants take in nitrogen from the soil along with the water. So plants depend upon soil, but in the soil, from where does this nitrogen come? Basically, the nitrogen gas which is present in the air, it is converted into nitrogen salts by by the process of nitrogen fixation. This is carried out by certain bacteria like Rhizobium, Azobacter, Clostridium. These bacteria, they are present in the soil. They take in nitrogen from that air and convert into soil. So they are actually this is a very useful process because these salts are then available to the plants for absorption. And one more benefit is to make antibiotics. In industry, many antibiotics are made by using bacteria. Example of antibiotics are streptomycin, tetracycline. You must have heard these common names. These are actually the medicines which are used to kill infection causing bacteria. Okay, suppose a person has some infection, some pathogen has entered its body, and these antibiotics are the medicines which are given, which actually kill these bacteria and treat the infection. So many antibiotics are made by using bacteria. These antibiotics can be given to humans, cattle, plants, and also the poultry, birds, to treat various infectious diseases. Next is vaccine production. Bacteria are also used to produce vaccines. Vaccines, actually they are the preventive medicines. They are denatured, either denatured bacteria or killed bacteria, which are injected into the body and used as medicine. Okay, I can explain you a little bit detail how do they work. Suppose this is a body of a living organism. So whenever some bacteria, okay, let's assume there is a bacteria, it infected it, it entered the body of living organism and it starts growing and multiplying. So what our body does, it makes antibodies which kills these bacteria. Okay, and infection is treated. But this takes some time, and by that time if that bacteria goes at a fast rate, then disease is caused. So how does vaccine work? What happens, these bacteria are taken, okay, whatever the causing, and it is denatured. It is either killed and denatured and injected into the human body or the body of maybe some other animal also. Vaccines are given to cattle and poultry, birds also. Once it is injected, it stimulates the development of antibodies. Okay, so antibodies are developed to kill this foreign object. But actual infection is not there because this bacteria, this is already denatured or already killed. So once this antibodies are developed, they remain in the body for some duration of time, maybe some years. Okay, so when there is actual infection in future, these antibodies are already there to fight that infection. Okay, so this is how the vaccines they work. Such denatured pathogens or killed pathogens, these are called vaccine, and this whole process, this whole phenomena is called vaccination. So there are many vaccinations like for cholera, tuberculosis and many other diseases. Some vaccines are given at birth to the newborn babies to boost their immunity. So once they have developed their antibodies, they can fight the future infection, actual infections. So many of these vaccines are produced using bacteria. Then in industries, they are used to produce vinegar, wines, alcohol, etc. Because some of the bacteria, they act upon fruit juices and cereals. So they convert these fruit juice, suppose some grape juice or some cereal like whey protein, they are converted into alcohol. This by the action of these microorganisms, and this process is called fermentation. So it is used in breweries to produce these alcohols and wines. Then it is also used in retting of fibers. So jute and flax, these fibers are made from the bark of the jute tree or the flax tree. So what happens, these roots, they are actually soaked in water for some time, and by the action of bacteria, the fibers get separated, and these fibers are used to make various objects like ropes or carpets or mats. Then another benefit is making biogas. So in this also, dead plants or animal waste, okay, it is put in the pits or some big boxes and to produce biogas. This happens due to the action of bacteria. Bacteria decomposes these dead plants and animal waste, and the decomposition leads to release of this gas which is called biogas, and it is used as a fuel either for cooking or for any other purpose. So it has dual effect. Firstly, we are getting a clean fuel, clean and a cheap fuel. On the other hand, it keeps the environment clean. It reduces the production of waste in rural areas. Then bacteria are also used for tanning of leather, curing of tea. Some of the bacteria, they help in digestion and absorption of food in human bodies. So a very good example is Escherichia coli, which in short you can call it as E. coli. This bacteria is present in the human gut and it helps in digestion of our food and absorption. It keeps our gut healthy. Then some of these bacteria, they are present in the gut of the ruminants, okay, like cattle, those herbivorous animals which eat grass and other plant parts. So these plant parts, they contain cellulose. Cellulose is a complex carbohydrate and it is very difficult to break it down into simpler compounds. So the bacteria which are present in the gut of the ruminants, it helps in breaking the cellulose into smaller, simpler compounds which is absorbed in the digestive system. So these were some of the useful effects of bacteria. On the other hand, some of the bacteria are harmful to us. How? First of all, some bacteria can cause food poisoning. If they are present in the food and that contaminated food is consumed by us, it can lead to food poisoning. Examples: Staphylococcus, Clostridium botulinum. These bacteria, they can contaminate the food and cause food poisoning. It also spoils our food, like souring of the milk. Milk becomes sour, or meat, fruits, vegetables, they get spoiled. Okay, if you keep some fruits, vegetables outside for some time, you can feel some foul smell coming out of it. So food is spoiled by bacteria. So one of the harmful effects. Then another harmful effect is the diseases caused by bacteria. Bacteria can cause a number of diseases to humans, to plants as well as animals. These are some of the examples: tuberculosis, cholera, typhoid. You must have heard these common names. These diseases are caused by bacteria. They also affect the plants. For example, fire blight of apple or pear. In animals, like bovine diseases of cattle. So there are many other diseases caused by bacteria. So that's all from this topic. Students, the next topic is fungi, another type of microorganism. The examples of fungi are yeast, mushroom, bread mold, etc. There are variety of fungi which exist in nature. Fungi, some of the fungus, they are unicellular like yeast, but some are multicellular like mushroom. You can actually see them, they are not microscopic. Some of the fungi, they live singularly, like alone, solitary life, but some fungi, they live in colonies, grouped together in colonies. The fungi, just like a plant, they have cell wall. Okay, they have cell wall which is made up of a tough carbohydrate called chitin. This is also called fungal cellulose. They lack chlorophyll. So although just like plants, they have this cell wall, but they lack chlorophyll. They are not autotrophic. They cannot prepare their own food. So they have heterotrophic mode of nutrition. The nutrition can be parasitic or saprotrophic. That is, they derive nutrients from either the host body or from the dead and decaying organic matter. They are usually found in dark and moist places, and they grow on organic matter like leather, shoes, or on bread, or on fruits. So you must have noticed during the rainy season some white powdery growth on your leather shoes or belts, and even on the bread you see green powdery organisms growing on the bread. So those are bread molds. So fungus, they usually grow in dark and moist places. They reproduce either by budding or by spore formation. Both are asexual modes of reproduction. This is the diagram of a rhizobium or the bread mold. They contain these tube-like structures which are called hyphae, and this network of hyphae is called mycelium, which can be meters long. Okay, and they have this ball-shaped structures which are called sporangium. Inside the sporangium, there are spores. Okay, so when this sporangium bursts, these spores are released into the air and they get dispersed. So they are present in the air. Once the conditions are favorable, once they get warmth, they get water and food, these spores, they start growing into new organisms. That is why if you keep bread in a moist place, what would happen? You will notice the powdery thing growing on the bread. So these are actually these rhizobium, because the spores, they fall on this bread and they start growing. If you look at them through lens, you will be able to see some of these tubular structures also. So next topic, what are the benefits of these fungi? Firstly, fungi are used in bakeries, especially the yeast. Okay, actually what does yeast do? It converts carbohydrates, especially the glucose, to release carbon dioxide and alcohol. Okay, so once yeast acts upon carbohydrate, carbon dioxide gas is released. So if it is mixed with dough and kept it aside, due to release of carbon dioxide, it rises, the dough rises, and it gives us soft, fluffy breads and cakes. It is also used in breweries to make alcohol. Okay, and then some of the fungi, they are used to prepare cheese in industries. Some organic acids like vinegar, acetic acid, they are also prepared by using yeast. Some of the fungi, they are good source of vitamin B complex, and some of the fungi are consumed as food. For example, mushrooms. Most of you must have eaten mushroom, so which is a fungus. Then one important benefit is that some of the fungus are used to produce antibiotics. What are antibiotics? They are the medicines which are used to kill the infection causing pathogens. So one example is penicillin. Okay, we obtain penicillin from fungus, and it is used to kill certain bacteria which causes infection. So once a person is infected, and if he is given the penicillin, the infection gets cured. Another, cephalosporin. So there are some antibiotics which are prepared by fungus. So these were useful effects, but fungi also have certain harmful effects. For example, it spoils the food. As I just told you, bread mold, this is an example. So if you leave food for some time, it starts growing because spores are present in the air. So once they get favorable condition, they start growing. And another example is if you leave pickle in open for some time, the white fibrous thing starts growing on the pickle also. So some of these fungus, they spoil our food. Then they spoil the leather. If you keep them in moist and dark areas, the fungus starts growing and it spoils it. Then some of the fungus also causes diseases in humans, in plants as well as in animals. In humans, mainly they are skin diseases like ringworm and athlete's foot. They are caused by fungus. Then black rust of wheat, blastomycosis, coccidiomycosis, these are animal diseases caused by fungus. These are few examples. There are many other diseases caused by fungi. So fungi are our friends as well as foe. Although some fungus are helpful to us and beneficial, and we are using them to make certain good products, but on the other hand, some of the fungi, they are harmful and cause diseases. That's all. Students, the next topic is another type of microorganisms, that is algae. Okay, so algae, just like plants, they contain chlorophyll. Okay, so that means if they have chlorophyll, they can trap solar energy and make their own food, just like green plants. So that is why their mode of nutrition is autotrophic. They are found usually in moist places or aquatic habitats like in lakes, in ponds, in rivers, and also in the sea. The size varies from 1 micron to several meters. Some of the algae are not visible to naked eye, but you can see some of the algae very clearly. You must have seen a green layer on the stagnant water or on the top of the lake. That is actually the algae. So, the structure, they have a thalloid body, but unlike plants, they do not have true root stem leaves. Although they have chlorophyll, but they are not classified as plants because they do not have these structures. Some of the algae are unicellular, while some of them are multicellular organism. Some of the algae, they live singularly, like solitary life, but some of them live together in colonies. Depending upon the color of the algae, we can divide into various categories. Green algae, for example, Spirogyra. Blue-green algae, for example, Anabaena. Brown algae, example is Fucus. Red algae, example is Polysiphonia. And then golden brown algae, example is Diatoms. So, according to the color, we have various categories of algae. Now, how do the algae reproduce? Some of the algae perform asexual reproduction, that is by binary fission or fragmentation. Asexual reproduction means only one parent is involved and the body, it splits into two cells, then it is called binary fission. While in Spirogyra, the body breaks down into few pieces or fragments and then each piece grows into a new organism, that is called fragmentation. While some of the algae also perform sexual reproduction in which gametes take parts. Male gamete and female gamete, they fuse together to give birth to new organism. So, different kinds of algae have different processes of reproduction. So, let's see what are the benefits of algae to us, how they are beneficial to us. Some of the algae, they are used as fertilizers. They are mixed in the fertilizers. For example, these blue-green algae, they convert the nitrogen into nitrogen salts. So, this process is called nitrification, in which they take in the nitrogen from the air and convert them into salts. These salts, they get mixed up in the soil and increase the fertility. So, they are mixed up in manure and fertilizer to improve the fertility of the soil. Some of these algae, they are food for the aquatic animals. So, suppose green algae, they are eaten up by small fish and which are in turn eaten up by the bigger fishes or other aquatic animals. So, they form a very important starting point for the food chain. Next, some of the algae, they actually provide us food. They are, for example, spirulina, it's a very good source of protein. So, in many countries, it is consumed as a part of the food. It is also acts as food for animals. So, it is mixed in the fodder for cattle or poultry or cattle like cow, sheep. It is some of the algae, they are mixed in this fodder because they are good source of vitamins, minerals and proteins. So, they are good source of vitamin minerals. Example is kelp. In industries also, algae are used to make agar-agar, which is actually used to make jellies and also in cosmetics. Okay. Then algin, it is used to make ice creams. This algin is actually obtained from algae. Then silica, which is obtained from some type of algae, it is used in glass industries. Okay. So, these are some of the benefits of algae, but some of the algae are harmful to us. First is eutrophication. Okay. So, you must have seen in stagnant water like lakes and ponds, there is a green upper layer Okay, although I told you it is good because it is the starting point for certain food chain. As algae are autotrophic, they can make their own food. But when this process actually goes on for a longer duration of time, the whole lake is covered with a thick layer of the algae, then what happens? The oxygen cannot penetrate, cannot diffuse into the water. So there is lack of oxygen in the deeper layers of water, and fish or other aquatic animals, they do not get enough oxygen. That process is called eutrophication, and it is harmful because it leads to lack of oxygen in water. Then some of the algae also add in toxins to the water. Example is Oscillatoria. These algae, they make the water poisonous or toxic. So these are some of the harmful effects of algae. So I told you about the benefits and as well as certain harmful effects. So algae are our friends as well as foe. So students, our next type of microorganism is protozoa. Okay, so protozoa are all unicellular organism. Examples are amoeba, paramecium, euglena. Amoeba, as you can see, it is a unicellular organism with an irregular shape. They move with the help of pseudopodia because their cell membrane is irregularly shaped, it is flexible, so they can produce certain pseudopodia, they can produce the projections and which helps in the movement and also to capture the food. Paramecium, on the other hand, it is slipper shaped, while euglena, this is, you can see, spindle shaped organism. So they move with the amoeba move with the help of pseudopodia. Paramecium help with the help of these tiny hair-like structure called cilia, while euglena, they move with the help of this long hair-like structure called flagella. The size varies from 2 to 200 microns. The mode of nutrition is heterotrophic. They do not contain chlorophyll, so they cannot prepare their own food. So some of them are parasitic, which take the food from the host organism. Some of them are saprotrophic, that is, they obtain food from dead and decaying matter. And some of these protozoa, they have symbiotic relationship with other organisms. And euglena, it also contains chlorophyll, so sometimes it can perform photosynthesis when it is there under the sunlight. So in the presence of sunlight, it can perform photosynthesis, but in the absence of sunlight, it can feed upon other organisms. So these are various types of heterotrophic modes of nutrition carried out by various protozoa. The modes of reproduction. Some of the protozoa, they undergo binary fission. For example, in the case of amoeba. Amoeba, what happens? There is a nucleus. So first of all, the nucleus starts dividing. Okay, it forms the replica of its DNA and it starts dividing, and then cytoplasm also starts dividing. The cell membrane starts growing inward, and then it ultimately leads to 2 amoebic cells. These are called daughter cells. So one cell of amoeba gives rise to 2 amoeba cells. This is called binary fission. This is how some of the protozoa, they reproduce. While some of the protozoa, they reproduce by bud formation, while others, they produce spores. Now, the next topic is how are some of the protozoa, they are helpful to us, how they are beneficial to us. First is they form a useful link in the food chain. I told you there are algae which contain chlorophyll, so they are autotrophic. They are consumed by certain protozoans. Then protozoans are eaten up by other organisms. So they form a useful link between autotrophs and heterotrophs. Next, they help in digestion of cellulose. So they are present in the gut of the ruminants. Ruminants are those animals which are herbivorous, which eat grass, and that grass contains cellulose. Cellulose is a complex carbohydrate and it is very difficult to break it into simpler compounds. So, some of the protozoa, good protozoa, healthy protozoa, they are present in the gut of these ruminants and it helps in the breakdown of cellulose. So, since this cellulose is broken down into simpler compounds, those simpler compounds are easily absorbed by the intestine. Now, next is how they are harmful to us. Okay. I told you some of the protozoa are helpful, but another type of protozoa, they cause diseases. Okay, students, the next type of microorganism is protozoa. So, let us study about it. The protozoa, they are unicellular organisms. The three important examples are amoeba, paramecium and euglena. Amoeba, as you can see, they are irregularly shaped. On the other hand, paramecium, they are slipper shaped, while euglena, they are spindle shaped. So, paramecium and euglena, they have fixed shape, while amoeba can change its shape. So, amoeba, all of three of them are unicellular. Amoeba, actually this cell membrane is flexible. It can produce these projections which are called pseudopodia. This pseudopodia, it helps in capturing the food as well as in movement. On the other hand, paramecium, they have these tiny hair-like structures which help in the movement. These are called cilia. The euglena, they have one long thread-like structure which is called flagella. This also helps in the locomotion or movement. The size varies from 2 to 200 microns. The mode of nutrition is heterotrophic. They do not contain chlorophyll, so they depend upon other organisms for the food. They cannot prepare their own food. So, mode of nutrition can be parasitic, in which they take in the food from the host organisms, and some of them are saprotrophic, that is they take food from the dead or the decaying organic matter, and some live in symbiotic relationship with other organisms. Only euglena has chlorophyll, so euglena can perform photosynthesis in the presence of sunlight. When sunlight is not there, it obtains food from other organisms. Okay, so that is why it is not classified as a plant, because it has heterotrophic mode of nutrition as well. So these are the various heterotrophic modes of nutrition followed by these protozoa. Now, these mode of reproduction, some of the protozoa, they reproduce by binary fission. Bi means two, fission means breaking up. So the body of protozoa breaks into two pieces and gives rise to two new daughter cells. So this is an example. This is a fully grown amoebic cell. First the nucleus starts dividing, DNA is replica is formed, DNA copying occurs and two DNA are formed. Then nucleus divides into two portions. Then cell membrane starts growing inward and divides cytoplasm also into two portions. So this gives rise to these two daughter cells and then they grow to form two new amoeba. So this is how reproduction occurs in amoeba. Some of the protozoa, they reproduce by budding, while some of them reproduce by spore formation. Now, how are these protozoans they helpful to us? What are their beneficial effects? Firstly, they are useful link in the food chain. I told you algae are autotrophic microorganisms. They have chlorophyll. They can make their own food. They are consumed by some of the protozoans. Okay. So these protozoans then are eaten up by other living organisms. So they form a useful link between autotrophs and heterotrophs, between producers and consumers. So once these protozoa they take up algae, they are eaten up. So a very useful link in food chain. Another important benefit is digestion of cellulose in ruminants' gut. Ruminants are those organisms which eat grass, for example cow. So the grass contains a very complex carbohydrate which is called cellulose. It is very difficult to digest cellulose or break it into simpler compounds for absorption. So some of the protozoa they are present in the gut of ruminants. It helps in the breakdown of the cellulose into simpler compounds. These simpler compounds are then easily absorbed. Next, some of the harmful effects of protozoa. Although they are beneficial, but some protozoans are harmful as they cause diseases. Diseases in humans, example amoebic dysentery which is caused by the amoeba, then malaria which is caused by plasmodium, then vaginitis. So these are some of the diseases caused by protozoa. Protozoa also affect animals. These two examples, trichomoniasis which causes blood which actually affects the bird liver, then coccidiosis which actually causes diseases in rabbits. So although on one hand some of the protozoa are helpful and beneficial, but on the other hand some other they are harmful to us and cause diseases. Students, now let's talk about some communicable diseases. What are communicable diseases? How can they be prevented and how are they cured? So communicable diseases are those which can get transferred from an infected person to a healthy person. So an infected person which is being infected by some of the microorganisms can actually spread the disease to healthy persons. So such diseases which can spread from infected to healthy are called communicable diseases. How do they spread? They can spread through direct or indirect contact between the infected and a healthy person. For example, if a person has a common cold and he is sneezing without covering his mouth, then tiny droplets are released in the air. These droplets they contain those harmful microorganisms which cause diseases. And if you inhale that air, then those microorganisms can enter your body and you can get infected. That is why we always suggest to keep your face or mouth covered while coughing or while sneezing, so that disease is not spread to other healthy people. Then another way of transfer of the disease is through carriers. Mosquitoes and insects, they act as carriers of diseases. For example, malaria. Malaria is caused by Anopheles mosquito. Okay, and similarly Aedes mosquito, it causes dengue. Okay, so these mosquitoes actually contains those pathogens which cause disease. So when they bite a healthy person, those pathogens get transferred into the blood of the healthy person, and then these microorganisms, they grow and cause diseases. So how can we prevent these communicable diseases? Firstly, do not allow the breeding of mosquitoes. So do not allow water to stagnate in open in your neighborhood, and do not allow the garbage to pile up in open, because they act as breeding ground for mosquitoes and flies, and these mosquitoes and flies, they spread the diseases. Second is to avoid going to crowded places, and while you are with some infected person, try to maintain a distance. Try not to use the items which are used by the infected person. Then build up a strong immunity, eat healthy food, eat fruits and vegetables, avoid junk food. And last, the best way to prevent a communicable disease is by vaccine. I'll tell you a little detail about how vaccines work. Okay, suppose this is the body of a living organism and this is a pathogen. So once pathogen enters into the living body, what happens? Our body prepares antibodies. Okay, this acts as antigen, while our body prepares antibodies to fight it. Okay, so our body produces antibodies which fights the antigens, but by the time these antibodies are made, these pathogens, they start multiplying, they reproduce and multiply. So if your immunity is not strong enough, these pathogens, they cause diseases, and then they are cured by taking some medicine. So how does vaccine work? What is done is, these pathogens, they are either denatured or killed. Okay, so they do not have the ability to cause a disease, they do not have the ability to reproduce, so they are injected into the body. Okay, so once they are injected into a healthy body, the body senses it that there is some foreign object, and it starts preparing antibodies against them. Okay, but this pathogen, it cannot reproduce. These antibodies, they are prepared. Once they are prepared in the body, they remain for some time, sometimes even for a few years. They remain in the body to fight the pathogens. Now in future, when really there is an infection, there is some actual pathogen enters our body, the antibodies are already there to fight it. So no time will be lost in preparing or in building the immunity. Antibodies are there, they will fight the infection, and the person will not get any disease. This is how the vaccines work. These denatured or killed pathogens are called vaccine, and this whole process is called vaccination. Many vaccines are given to newborn babies to prevent diseases like cholera, typhoid, tuberculosis and measles, and from time to time children are given these vaccines to prevent various diseases. So that's all from this topic. Hello students, our next topic is food preservation. We discussed in the topic microorganisms, our friends and foe, that microorganisms can spoil our food, and it is very important to preserve the food. Firstly, because food is important, we do not want it to get spoiled, and secondly, consumption of spoiled food can cause various diseases. So let's discuss what are the various ways by which we can actually preserve our food. First of all, refrigerate. When the temperature is very low, the microorganisms cannot grow. So if you refrigerate certain food items, the microorganisms cannot grow into it and the food will be preserved. Second option is to heat the food. Okay, once the food is heated, all the microorganisms are killed, and so they will not reproduce or multiply in your food, and food will be preserved. For example, in milk, pasteurization is done before milk is packed into the packets and supplied to our homes. Louis Pasteur was the scientist who said that if actually he told us that if milk is heated at 60 to 70 degrees Celsius, then all microorganisms are killed, and then it is suddenly cooled down at a low temperature and packed. So the microorganisms will not grow, and such milk, the pasteurized milk, can stay good for a longer duration of time. Another option is to add salt or sugar or oil, vinegar, such things, because in the presence of high concentration of salt, sugar and oil, microorganisms cannot grow. So food can be preserved. For example, while making pickle, we add oil and salt into the fruits. Okay, so pickles are made and they are good for so long. Similarly, while making jams, we just add sugar, large quantity of sugar to the fruit, and it remains good for a longer duration of time. Then another process is called canning. The canned food, actually once the food is canned, it is sealed from all the sides, so air cannot enter in, so microorganisms cannot enter and the food remains good. It is not spoiled for a very long time. Inside the can also air is taken out. Usually such cans, they are flushed with nitrogen gas. So once oxygen is not there, microorganisms cannot grow. Then by adding chemical preservatives. So salt, sugar, oil and vinegar also act as preservatives, but some chemical preservatives are also there, which once added to the food, they do not allow the growth of microorganisms and they keep the food healthy for us. Okay, so that's all from this topic. So students, let's study about nitrogen cycle. Nitrogen cycle actually refers to the cycle in which the nitrogen moves in our nature from air to the soil, then into the body of living organisms. Nitrogen is a very important mineral because it is a part of many enzymes, hormones and proteins. So all of us, either plants or humans or other animals, we all need nitrogen. And nitrogen is present in large quantity in air. But we cannot breathe in nitrogen. In our lungs, nitrogen exchange does not occur. We cannot absorb nitrogen through our lungs from the air. So how do we obtain nitrogen? Then how it circulates into the nature? That is called nitrogen cycle. So let's see. First of all, there is nitrogen in the atmosphere. High concentration of nitrogen is there in the air. Then some of the bacteria and blue-green algae, they fix nitrogen. Okay. So during fixation, what happens? Nitrogen is converted into nitrogen compounds. This process is called nitrogen fixation. That is converting nitrogen gas to nitrogen compounds. These compounds are then get mixed up in the soil. So high amount of nitrogen nitrogen salts, they are present in the soil now. This nitrogen fixation either occurs by the action of these bacteria or algae, some of the algae. It also occurs during lightning. Okay. So during lightning, what happens? Due to certain chemical reactions, nitrogen gets converted into nitrogen salt, then it falls down with the air and gets mixed up in the soil. So this is how the nitrogen in the air gets converted into salt and enters the soil. Now from the soil, these plants, they take in this nitrogen from the soil. Through the roots, they absorb water, and these nitrogen salts are get dissolved in water and they are absorbed into the roots, so they reach the plant body. Then some of the animals, they eat plants, and some other animals, they eat other animals. So directly or indirectly, this nitrogen enters into the body of the animals. So once these enters the animal body, and nitrogenous wastes are excreted out, and these animals also die. So in both the cases, either it is animal waste or the dead plants and animals, all this nitrogen gets mixed up in the soil again. Okay, so the cycle is completed, taken up by the plant body, and again it comes back to the soil. Then there are certain other kind of bacteria which convert these nitrogen compounds which are present in the soil and convert into nitrogen gas, which is again released back into the nature. This process is called denitrification, in which salts are converted into nitrogen gas which enters into the atmosphere. So, this completes the nitrogen cycle, and it is a continuous cycle. Nitrogen keeps on moving from air to bacteria, then soil, then body of plants and animals, and back into the air. Okay, that's all from this topic.